Hello, I'm Dave Hill, founder, publisher and editor of the journalism website onlondon.co.uk. The subject of this podcast is the Green Party in London. The Greens, as you all know, have just elected a new national leader. He is Zack Polanski, who is a member of the London Assembly and therefore already has a bit of a profile in the capital. The Greens have had a presence on the Assembly since it was invented, and they currently have 3 members on the 25-member elected scrutiny body. They also have 20 councillors in London's 32 boroughs, including Lambeth, Islington and Hammersmith and Fulham. That's not bad for a small party, but it isn't huge. With next year's borough elections beginning to appear on the horizon, can the Greens strengthen their support in London? And will Zack Polanski's leadership help? To explore those questions, I am joined by Jenevieve Treadwell. Jenevieve is a policy fellow working on a programme called Leading for London at the London School of Economics. And she is very good at detecting which ways the political winds are blowing in the capital. Jenevieve, it's lovely to have your company. What do you think the impact of Zack Polanski's election as Green Party leader is going to be in the capital?
I don't think it should be understated the difficult and limited position that the Greens have in London so far. In 2024 at the Assembly elections, the Greens didn't close to winning any constituencies. And in 2022, the Greens won fewer seats across the whole of London than Aspire won in Tower Hamlets. In the 2024 local elections, they performed modestly well in other cities like Manchester or Leeds. The top 5 councils with the strongest Green presence are, aside from Bristol, all rural or towns. That includes places like Mid Suffolk or Stroud, Forest of Dean even. But a lot has changed since then, and Labour has become the incumbent government and kind of, obviously to most, a lot more unpopular. And that will leave them to do quite poorly in the upcoming local elections.
Okay, so it's very interesting that you've emphasised the point that the Green Party seems to represent different things to different people in different parts of the country. And that's not only a Green Party problem, I guess, but it's does seem quite a pronounced one for them. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing Zack Polanski's elevation to the leadership as a sort of triumph of the sort of the big city and university city part of the Green support across the UK. Seems to be that those are the sorts of people who would have wanted somebody strident and rather militant and outspoken to be their leader. Is that and which could perhaps mean that he will galvanise and maximise the party's support in London in the months to come? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a relatively high-risk strategy. As you kind of alluded to, the Greens aren't a totally coherent party yet, and that is normal of a lot of parties, but they normally are a bit bigger before they get to that stage. It's very clear at the last election about how that split looked. You had your kind of more NIMBYist Greens, those that wanted to defend nature. They're kind of the traditional ones that were against HS2 for quite a long period of their history. You had those that were much more interested in foreign affairs, so those are the ones that split their vote between the Green Party and those running on an independent platform, kind of more targeted towards Gaza. And then on the other hand, you have those kinds of voters that are backing them for left-wing economic principles. So that's quite a large coalition, quite a broad church to keep under one roof. And even at the last election, we can see that playing out. So they only won 3 new seats. One of them is a city-based one and 2 is rural. So they came second in 39 seats. And while that is an impressive number, they only came within 30 percentage points within 10 of those. Of the 10 that they came second in, below 30 percentage points, only 2 were in London, and that's in Stratford and Limehouse. So over the summer, YouGov ran an MRP, and that looked at projecting forward what would the parties look like at a next general election if it were to be held now. The Greens only won 3 additional seats, and none of them were in London. So I think the promises that Zack Polanski is making are quite grand. They might be quite invigorating for many of their voters, but it doesn't reflect the position the party is in right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, I'm going to embarrass you now by mentioning to people that after the general election, you produced an extremely interesting map which showed which parties had come in second position in all of the parliamentary constituencies across London. And it was extraordinary because you could practically draw a line from north to south through Greater London, and to the west of that line the contests were between Labour, which won most of the seats, and the Conservatives, that won a few of them. And to the right, to the east of that line, you had a complete patchwork of different colours. There was quite a lot of green on that. So what does that tell us about which parts of London the Greens are most popular in? And perhaps you could then go on from that to say, who are these people?
The Greens do best in central London and slightly to the east. Further east, you're getting into Reform territory, and once again, Labour being the second party. But the Greens are doing best in places like Islington, in, as I said, Bethnal Green, Lewisham East. These are places where the Greens have a relatively strong position in the city. That part of London is largely dominated by left Liberal voters, those that are interested in left economic principles and liberal politics. So they are more interested in open social politics. That being said, the Greens did very well in Barking and Dagenham, tying with Reform for second place. That suggests that the way the party has presented itself is opening up to new voters. And I think that is another problem with this broad church coalition that they've built, that it's going to be hard to pull, even just within London, these different groups together.
Right.
Voters in Barking, Dagenham and Islington are quite different.
Yes, I'd like to come on to Barking and Dagenham in a more specific way in a moment. But so just to sort of break that down a bit, so I live in Hackney, and I noticed over quite a long period of time that in by-elections in my borough, when the Labour Party is seen by a certain group of the population as being, too right-wing, not radical enough, the Greens' share in by-elections tends to go up, and the Labour share tends to go down. So that says to me that we've mentioned Lewisham, and I think we've got some Green councillors in Lambeth and so on. So it's a certain kind of well to the left of centre person who gets fed up with the Labour Party, perhaps, and they bolster Green support. Where else can they do well? Now, there was a by-election very recently in Barking and Dagenham, Thames View ward, I think, and to everybody's surprise, the Greens came a very good second in that by-election. Reform, who many people, because of the history of Barking and Dagenham, the electoral history going back to the early part of this century, you would think that Reform might be a strong challenge to Labour in that borough, but actually, lo and behold, it was the Greens who challenged Labour most strongly. So, insofar as you can extrapolate anything more general from that result, what do you think it tells us about how the Greens can do well in different places?
I think it's quite difficult to extrapolate too much from very localised elections, because you're picking up on such small localised areas of politics, reflecting very limited dynamics that might be ironed out at a constituency level. But that being said, I think that this possibly reflects the Greens' ability to appeal to this left economic principle that exists in Barking, perhaps less about the environment. And
Yes.
that, I suppose, stitches together those two coalitions.
Yes. One interesting thing about that ward is that you've got a lot of new housing there, and perhaps quite a lot of people who are new to the borough. Is that so? Could there be a sense? And I know I'm asking you to speculate, beyond what a proper professional person like yourself really ought to. But go on, bear with me. Could it be that the long-established outward migration patterns of younger people moving further from the centre? Younger people in particular moving further to the centre to more outlying parts of London and bringing their sort of inner London politics with them. Could that be a factor that would help the Greens, do you think?
Both help and hinder. You're right that there is a well-documented phenomenon of when metropolitan people from the centre of London are moving out for house price affordability, for family size, they might change the politics around them. But that has a knock-on effect. If they are outpricing local people, that might make those people less happy with the status quo and push them away from some of those parties and towards alternatives. If Greens come to represent the new metropolitan side of Barking, that will leave a whole other group of people looking for a new party to support. And that's where they'll come into a bit of conflict, I think.
Okay. Now, one thing that hasn't been discussed very much is people talk about where Labour might lose votes to its left, and of course there's the possibility of this new Jeremy Corbyn co-led or maybe not party, which could also come into the equation. In the 2018 borough elections and the 2022 borough elections, we saw an electoral pact in Richmond between the Lib Dems and the Greens. They've sort of split the ticket in 3-member wards, which is really interesting. The feeling that these two parties had a lot in common, and it would benefit them both if they worked together. And that's a kind of very different sort of chemistry and kind of electoral formula from what we've been talking about to the east of that line we talked about. What do you think? What do you think people in Richmond, who kind of quite fancied the Greens in the past, will be thinking about Zack with his strident rhetoric?
Again, a difficult line to walk for them. In a lot of different parts of London, the Greens and your party, to be named, will be competing for the same voters. So they'll need to coordinate carefully in order to not hurt one another in a bid to hurt Labour. But in other places, you're right, that campaigning for wealth taxes might be off-putting for the voters in Richmond, which puts them down against the Lib Dems in those places. So it's an incredibly difficult line to walk for them. What's more likely is something like what happened in Chingford, where the left split allowed the Conservatives to take the seat.
Okay, and you think that's a real possibility because clearly the potential exists for the various different types of party seen broadly as to the left of Labour cancelling each other out if they can't come to some sort of agreement between them not to get in each other's way.
Well, certainly the cannibalisation of the left. There's 3 parties that can compete with Labour for the left-wing vote. That's the Lib Dems, the Greens, and now your party as well. Not to mention independents in other seats.
What people sometimes refer to as Gaza independents, although there's actually a bit more to them than that. But that's
Precisely.
what you're referring to, yeah.
And I think it shouldn't be forgotten that the Greens benefited a lot from those types of votes in the past. Those that were looking to take a stand on the Gaza war, but didn't have a party to represent them in that way. Your party will similarly fill a bit of a void in that sense. So the historically promising performance of the Greens in the 2024 election may not be repeated now that there are more options on the table for voters that are concerned about those issues.
Okay, right. So to sum up, Zack Polanski, member of the London Assembly, colourful, charismatic, confident, quite militant sounding. Is he going to be good for the Greens in London or not? Or is it too early to tell?
I'll hedge my bets and say too early to tell. Of course, he has all of the attributes you described, which are obviously a promising factor. But realistically, the Greens have a lot to make up in the country as a whole, but especially in London, if they're to win any more seats. And he's really starting from the bottom in that sense. There are no Green constituencies in London. And as much as he's had a role in the London Assembly for a number of years, that doesn't really translate into name recognition necessarily, or the infrastructure needed to win a seat.
Jenevieve, thank you so much. That was incredibly interesting. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for watching and listening. And remember to keep reading on london.co.uk. Thanks and bye-bye.